Welcome to the Nickyokoyepodcast.com, and thank you very much for subscribing and downloading our most unique and most powerful material till date, The Entrepreneur Advisor by Nicky Okoye. Entrepreneur Advisor is one of our series of exceptional, content-filled, empowering, and exhilarating podcasts, designed and produced for the 21st century entrepreneur and business executive wherever they may be on the globe. Dr. Nicky Okoye, our anchor, is a serial entrepreneur, experienced business executive, and a 30-year veteran of building businesses and funding projects. He has also advised heads of states, presidents, and heads of global conglomerates on 3 different continents of the world, including North America, Europe, and Africa. His efforts at leading a venture from startup conception stage to billion-dollar status in less than 18 months is legendary. The Entrepreneur Advisor podcast series provides our listeners with extensive insight into the latest 21st century strategies for business development, investment capital aggregation, and global market penetration. In addition, Nicky Okoye tackles the most pertinent issues while providing tactical insight as well as strategic solutions for building sustainable enterprises over the long term. Let's sit back and listen to Dr. Okoye. If you wish to engage Dr. Nicky directly, you can follow him at Nicky Okoye on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Again, that's NICKY OKOYE on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
Hi, welcome back. This is Dr. Nicky Okoye, and this is the Nicky Okoye Podcast. This is episode 7 of the Entrepreneur Advisor Podcast, and I am going to be taking you again through the strategic applications of some of the most innovative business models that we are beginning to see in the 21st century. And I will break down these models in order for you to be able to take advantage of using them in your own environment. And in some cases, you may use them to penetrate specific markets across the world. We're still talking about market penetration. And in episode 6, I did tell you that there are abstract terms in terms of market penetration strategy. We have the local content strategy, which I went in to define. Local content can be looked at from 2 sides. Either you're an international conglomerate trying to get into Africa, for instance, or the Caribbean, and you want to take advantage of a local content strategy, means that you might want to partner with a local player or a local company, and then that local company, by virtue of the fact that he or she has partnered with you, gets access to your technology, gets access to your processes and your systems, and is able to unsell your services or your products to the government in that particular country or to a specific projects which are being targeted. And in that case, they get the job because they have the best technology coming from you, and because there's a local content policy in place, which means the buyers, whether it's a government buyer or a government associated project or a government regulated project, they must buy from the local folks. So local content strategy works for international conglomerates penetrating into emerging markets like Africa or the Caribbean. And it also works for the local players as well. And so local players can take advantage of local content strategy and use it to develop local skills, get access to technology, and even develop local technology, and then also get access to partnerships. These partnerships, especially partnerships from international companies based in the United States, Europe, or Asia, China, Japan, even Korea, as the case may be. But I also want to go into the further definition of market penetration strategy and give you a broader view of where are the markets that you may want to adapt or design a market penetration strategy that would work for your business. And so I have outlined a few of them here, and I have about 8 that I'm going to share with you between episode 7 and episode 8. And so the first is, I'll run through them really quickly, and then I will go into a little bit more detail. The first is the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. 54 African countries came together, signed an agreement to create a single market. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. The second is the Caribbean strategy. So what are the opportunities in the islands of the Caribbean, and what do we need to access those opportunities? What is going on in the Caribbean? The third is the African Diaspora Strategy. So there is a huge diaspora population of African immigrants living in Europe and the United States, and they have been able to develop themselves into a viable market. So how do we penetrate that market? What will be our market penetration strategy for this particular market? What appeals to these folks? What kind of products or services should I offer them if I was to design a market penetration strategy for the diaspora community? And then number 4, you have the African American strategy. So the African American population in the United States, it has a huge market into on themselves. Their GDP is incredibly large. And so the whole total African American income is estimated at about $2.4 trillion. And if you combine that with the Hispanic income, which is about 1.5 trillion, you have a combined minority economy within the United States of over 3.9, maybe $4 trillion. Now, you can see that it is competing with the entire GDP of the entire African continent. So I'll get back to that in a second. Then we have the Hispanic Strategy, which is number 5. And what is the Hispanic Strategy? What is a market penetration strategy to sell to the Hispanic community, especially within the United States as an ethnic community? And then we have what I call the Global Capital Strategy. Now, the Global Capital Strategy, typically as a market, we are obviously referring to the private equity firms, the VCs, the DFIs, VCs being venture capitals, the DFIs being development finance institutions, family offices, and so on. So what is the penetration here? Maybe your typical request to them would be they should invest in your company, right? Or in your idea, or in your growing business. But there's also another spill to it. There's a different angle. They also have a value chain, which we can look at in more detail. Then there's the China strategy. The China strategy is a very exciting strategy, especially for emerging market economies, because China will be relocating over 90 million jobs over the next 5 years. This is regardless of the current coronavirus situation. So this is before the coronavirus. China has already developed into a middle and high income country. And so a lot of the jobs in some of those factories, the Chinese people don't want to do them anymore. You know, some of these jobs they're not typical for somebody who is earning a good income. So in that case, opportunities are bound for countries in Africa, the Caribbean, some other parts of Asia to position their countries and their people to take advantage of the obvious shift of manufacturing sites out of China. And with the coronavirus experience now, some companies are beginning to fast track their planned shifting of their factories. So they're beginning to see the challenges and the risk of doing all your manufacturing and your entire value chain within one jurisdiction. And so that gives you a nutshell of the 8 market penetration strategies that I look at from a geographical level and from an abstract level. Now, let's look at the African Continental Free Trade Area again. Depending on whose statistics you are studying, some would tell you that Africa has a $3.2 trillion market in terms of GDP. And if you look further, you'll see that it's actually 6.4 trillion. And why do I say 6.4? Because if you use the purchasing power parity, PPP, a PPP calculation tells us that the price of a breakfast in New York cannot be compared to the price of breakfast in Lagos or in Johannesburg or in Accra or in Mombasa or in Maputo or in Malabo. Now, the African cities, obviously, you will not spend as much as you would spend in New York to eat breakfast. And so you have to use a purchasing power parity index. It will not cost you as much as it would cost you in New York, so live in New York, or to live in Africa. So with that index, you cannot expect the same scale that you use to calculate the GDP for the United States and Europe. You use that same scale to calculate GDP in Africa, which is what everybody seems to be doing. So if you use the purchasing power parity index, you get over $6 trillion African economy. So Africa is huge. And with this new free trade area agreement, means it's now the largest single market in the world. The area agreement will be kicking off in June. 54 countries have signed. And it means that you can actually site your plant in Nigeria and access the Ghanaian market, or site your plant in Sierra Leone and supply to the Côte d'Ivoire market, Ivory Coast market. So this is very exciting. What are the kind of products and services that we would see in this cross-border environment? Now, the first area I would look at if I wanted to use a market penetration strategy for Africa, taking advantage of the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement, which is launching in June, is that I would look at aviation. Now, believe it or not, a lot of the African countries are not connected. You would have to go to France before you would be able to connect some of the Francophone countries of Cameroon and so on from specific cities in Africa. There are no direct flights. A lot of these nations and cities do not have direct flights. And so there would be huge opportunity to interconnect Africa with aviation. African cities need to be interconnected. If we're going to be doing business with each other, then we're going to need to travel within each city. We don't need to go to London in order to go to Accra. You know, so some of these connections have already taken place. You can get a flight from Lagos to Accra, but you can't get a flight from Lagos to Malabo. Malabo, you know, there's one flight on a Monday and then there's another flight on a Friday. So whatever you're doing in Malabo, you have to stay 1 week, about 5 days, in order for you to access Malabo. There's no flight between Lagos and Maputo, so you have to connect through Joburg or through Dubai or through one of these other places. So there's a lot of opportunity. There's going to be a lot of opportunity in the aviation sector, you know, to bring the African free trade area to life. Now, in the aviation sector, again, you have a subset of the aviation sector, which is logistics. Now, that's going to be huge, moving goods between Africa. And that logistics is also subdivided into air freight logistics and ship freight logistics, because there is going to be light goods are going to move very quickly, first of all. So you're going to have a lot of light goods, textiles, clothes, electronics, and so on. This can be done by air. And then you're going to have heavy goods moving around, and that will be done by sea. But the good news is that smaller planes will start off, you know, hopping between nation states and nations' capitals, moving goods around, moving letters, moving packages, And then it will begin to explode and expand to much more interesting goods and services. And so logistics is going to be a big industry in the Continental Free Trade Area. I would expect that if you are in the logistics industry or you're thinking about the logistics industry, then Africa would be a place for you to come and study what's about to go on in this area. The fast-moving consumer goods are also going to explode. For instance, a lot of the Francophone countries in West Africa, believe it or not, they still get a lot of their goods from France. So soap is coming from France and toilet paper sometimes. Some basic things like pens and pencils, t-shirts and so on. So there's going to be a huge opportunity for African businesses to supply the markets of the Francophone countries within Africa, taking advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area and, kind of nudging France a bit. You want to get out of the way, France. This is Africa's time, So I think there's going to be a huge opportunity in the FMCG, the fast-moving consumer goods. There'll be opportunities in automobile industry, transportation. Some of these industries will do quite well. And so I expect that the automobile industry will kind of expand because people will be building new factories in Africa in order to supply their goods and services to other countries. So let's talk about how do we penetrate African markets using the African Continental Free Trade Area. Now, one thing would be to obviously set up base in Africa. You're gonna have to decide on which of the 54 countries in Africa suits your best requirements. And that means you're gonna study the tax incentives, the labor market, government policy, the security situation. Once you have figured out all these, then you're gonna figure out, okay, so where are your markets? Where are the populations? Where are the large population centers? Depending on who you're looking to target, if you're looking to target an affluent population or middle class population, or you're looking at a mass market kind of strategy, that will determine. So you have the option of citing your office or facility near the market, which is a very large population center. Out of the 54 countries, we know that Ethiopia has a large population, but not as large as Nigeria. We also know that South Africa is a middle large population. It also has a very vibrant economy and a large GDP, as does Nigeria. And then we also know that Ghana is kind of a smaller population, but they do have a strong growth prospect. So they have a growing affluent population if you are looking for an affluent market. And then the government is extremely friendly, investor friendly, as is the government in Rwanda. So you're gonna think, okay, do I want to be in Rwanda with an investor friendly government, but I'm gonna have to ship my goods to Nigeria from Rwanda in order to get access to a large market? Same thing, would I have to put my plant in Mozambique and then ship into South Africa, or do I just put my plant in South Africa and then access Mozambique, Zambia, Tanzania, Botswana, and so on from there? So those are the kind of decisions that strategists will be working out, and boards will be making the final decisions on them. But the good news is the African Continental Free Trade Area is here to stay. It is going to throw up immediate opportunities in aviation, in logistics, in fast-moving consumer goods, in shipping, in automobile industry, and also in services, especially services. And some of the services that I think are going to be extremely lucrative include entertainment services. Entertainment industry, as you know, includes movies, music, concerts, comedy shows, and so on and so forth. And so Africa Continental Free Trade Area, starting off June 2020. Excellent opportunity to penetrate Africa, taking advantage of the free trade area that has been developed. If you want to participate in that market, you're going to have a base or a facility within one of the 54 countries in Africa. And then from there, you can supply markets across the entire continent. You get access to a $3.2 trillion market using US standards for GDP calculations, or $6.4 trillion if you are using purchasing power parity to calculate the GDP, the gross domestic product, for all the 54 African nations put together. So the next one strategy I talked about is the Caribbean strategy. I like to look at the Caribbean strategy. It has quite a number of island nations, not too far from the United States. Most of them are in tropical weather, and they are an exciting opportunity. Very exciting because very highly educated population. The populations are well educated. The United States has been the main investment partner in the Caribbean over the last 30 years, building some of the most luxurious and exciting resorts, holiday resorts, and the hospitality industry. But of recent, China is now the most important investor in the Caribbean, taking over from the United States. Canada has moved in as well. So you now have China as number one, and then United States and Canada are competing for number 2 and 3. So that says something. The world has taken notice of the investment opportunities in the Caribbean. And whereas a lot of folks have focused almost exclusively on the hospitality industry, there are huge opportunities across so many other industries. But let's look at the hospitality industry for a second. And you will see that the hospitality industry can be subdivided and sub-segmented if you want to play in that industry in the Caribbean. So for instance, I use my matrix, what I call the value chain intelligence. I talked about value chain intelligence in previous episodes. Now, if you look at the value chain intelligence matrix of the hospitality industry in the Caribbean, you can see that you don't necessarily have to own a hotel if you want to be part of that particular value chain. The value chain intelligence system within that industry is huge. You can be a tour guide, you can have a guide company, you could be a travel agent organizing strategic tours and strategic travel solutions for high net worth individuals, or for students, or for middle class folks, or for working population to go to the Caribbean. You could have a tour every week in one Caribbean nation or the other. You could have people who are doing island hopping, so that's part of it. Then you could be the one that owns the charter flights. Not everybody wants to go commercial. So sometimes you put a group together of 20 people, 25 people, then you want to charter a smaller plane. And you could decide that your job is to provide the charter plane. So the Caribbean hospitality industry also has what I call a supply chain. So the global supply chain is tapped deep and embedded into that industry. You have folks who are focused almost exclusively on supplying furniture for some of those lovely, luxurious resorts that you have all over the Caribbean. So the furniture business, and that itself has subsets. You have the upholstery, textiles, leather, folks who are focused on just the artificial flowers, artificial plants, the folks who are drapes and curtains, and so there's a whole value chain and supply chain that deals with that. And then a lot of those resorts have to be cleaned. So there are cleaning companies that are partnering with the resort managers and are providing resort cleaning services across the entire Caribbean islands. Very huge business. Then there are folks who are focused on the manpower, so training the folks who are running these resorts. The resort's customer service is world class. I mean, if you've been to any Caribbean resort, worth its salt, you will get world-class treatment as far as customer service is concerned. I think that some of the best managed hotels and accommodations, you will probably find them in the Caribbean, because they have over the years come to understand exactly how to make a customer feel exclusive and have a good time on a 1 or a 2 week vacation. So there's a lot of work that goes into training those people and those folks, and there are people who are positioned for that particular kind of business. So it's part of the supply chain. Then you talk about the uniforms. There are uniform companies. There are companies that are focused on the textile aspects of the Caribbean hospitality value chain industry. And that is also quite huge. We can go on and on and on and on and on. It goes outside the scope of this particular podcast. The point I'm making is that just from a hospitality sector alone, the Caribbean continues to provide opportunity. And so a market penetration strategy would obviously have to be designed by taking into account those opportunities that continue to grow. There are resorts that are under construction as we speak. Who is going to supply the beddings to those resorts, for instance? The bed sheets, the pillowcases, the actual pillows, the mattresses. Where is all that coming from? Do we leave all these things to the large companies, or do some of our people, and when I say our people, I'm referring to Caribbean business people, African business people, can they tap into some of these supply chains? That's the market penetration strategy I want us to get excited about. And so you can see that if we look at it from a geographical perspective, market penetration strategy tends to lend itself to different geographies or geographical locations, as the case may be. And then every industry obviously has its own peculiarity. The African Diaspora Strategy, now that's number 3. Now, in terms of the African Diaspora Strategy, I think that is huge, and that requires a proper, to sit down maybe in episode 8, and then I could give you the details on how exciting the African Diaspora Strategy is and how exciting the African Diaspora market is for a company or an individual entrepreneur who is looking to design a market penetration strategy to penetrate that particular market. But it's wide. I mean, I just mentioned a few things here. It's wide. They're huge. Looking at Nigeria alone, for instance, the diaspora community in Nigeria sent back to Nigeria $25 billion. And that's the one that was recorded. The unrecorded is calculated to be about an extra $10 to $12 billion. So if you add that, you can see that there is 38 to 40 billion possibly going back to Nigeria on behalf of the diaspora community. That's a huge market. And that market lends itself to peculiar services, goods and services that they like. Many of them are not coming back to Nigeria anymore, not permanently anyway, so they're going to keep living in America, schooling in America, working in America, and so they constitute a market. And I will tell you in episode 8 exactly how we can penetrate that market. If you are thinking of a strategy for them, or you haven't thought of a strategy for them, then I'm going to give you a couple of strategies. And that's why I set up this podcast, which is share with you some of the most sophisticated business models and strategies for free that you can use, create wealth. And if you want to share it with me, that would be great. But you can create the wealth and share it with your family. I don't mind. I just want to share. There's a lot of ideas that come to me. There are a lot of strategies that come to me on a daily basis. I want to just put it all out there because there's a limit to what I can do myself. So I'm going to share with you. I'm going to share with the world these ideas that keep bombarding my head every time I go to bed. I get all kinds of ideas of business strategies, business models, opportunities to create wealth. And I'm just going to keep putting it out there so that you guys can just, grab those ideas and run with it. And let me know how it's going. You can hit me up on @NICKY NICKYOKOYE. And that would be on Twitter, that would be on Instagram, that's on Facebook, and that's on LinkedIn. So it's the same handle, @Nickyokoye. And then the website is Nickyokoyepodcasts.com, which you probably know because you're listening to the podcast. And then I also do speaking engagements. So I do come and speak to specific business associations, business groups, and help you to mobilize yourselves, help you to get the right strategy in place and take you to the next level. I hope you are very successful in your business. I hope you are able to raise the necessary capital that you need. And if you need help with that, let me know. I do advise on how you can aggregate capital on a global level. And that's why I call it Global Capital Strategy. I also hope you're quite successful in your business penetration. You might have your business ideas already. You might be thinking about what to go into. Hit me up @Nickyokoye. And that is NICKYOKOYE on all the platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and I will reply. I want to hear from you. I want to see how you're doing, and I want to be your entrepreneur advisor going forward. Thank you very much for listening. Look forward to episode 8.